You join me in Mexico where, despite the wishes of my auto trader colleagues, I have flat refused to go anywhere near a sombrero. Sorry chaps, just not happening. Anyway, there's no room for lazy stereotypes here because, as you can see, Mexico is actually really very civilized, especially here in the beach resort of Cabo San Lucas. I don't have time for splashing about anyway, because the reason I'm here is to get to know this, the brand new Audi Q5. Now this thing is seriously big news, and for a couple of reasons. Firstly, this car is a massive seller all over the world, not least in the UK, so there'll be plenty of current Q5 owners out there wondering whether they should make the upgrade when this thing finally arrives in the UK early next year. There's also the fact that just 6 days ago, this car was on a stand at the Paris Motor Show being unveiled to the world for the first time. And here we are, just less than a week later, driving the thing. Never let it be said that Auto Trader doesn't have its finger on the pulse. The question is, why have we come all the way to Mexico to have a go? Well, because Mexico is home to Audi's newest factory, which opened this week and was built at a cost of more than $1 billion. And it's where all Q5s sold around the world are going to be built. And where better to test the car than in its own backyard. From here, we'll be heading off on something of a musical pilgrimage, which will become clear later on, but we'll be putting the Q5 through its paces on the way. Speaking of which, it's about time for us to vamonos. Now, I need to point out at this stage that the Q5 we're driving is a pre-production car. What does that mean? Well, it means that while 99.9% of things are exactly as they will be on the final production car that you'll park outside your house, there's just one or two things that haven't been 100% signed off. The Audi pods accompanying us assure me that on this car, it's just a few of the seals, the way the doors shut, that sort of thing. So everything else, engines, transmission, suspension, they are the finished article. The question is, are they any good? Well, it's a good start that the car is based on the same platform as the brand new Audi A4, which has allowed it to shed almost 100 kilos compared with the old Q5, and that results in a whole heap of benefits. The way the car behaves on the standard suspension setup is still something of a mystery, because the car we've got here has the optional air suspension, but with it fitted, you're going to be very impressed. Slap it in comfort mode and it smooths out bumpy surfaces really well, and there's that nice wafty feeling as you plough along at any speed, and that is really important in a car that is primarily going to be used as a family car. So is mechanical refinement, which is also really very impressive. When the road turns twistier, all you do is smack it down into dynamic mode and you're rewarded with really nice tight body control and shed loads of grip. Granted, it won't spread a smile across your face in quite the same way as a Jag, F-Pace or Porsche Macan will, because the steering, although it's nice and weighty and really consistent, it doesn't quite have that same level of involvement or engagement. That said, you really cannot argue with how capable the handling feels. Initially, you'll choose between two engines, both 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged units, a petrol with 248 brake horsepower and a diesel with 187. Now, everybody in the UK is going to buy the diesel, but we've only had the opportunity to drive the petrol. And while it's a little bit irrelevant, it's actually all right. It's not as devastatingly quick as the power output suggests, but it's smooth, it's muscular enough to keep you bowling along at a fair old rate, and it has a nice rorty sound when you extend it. It also works reasonably well with the 7-speed twin-clutch gearbox that you get as standard on this version. Bear in mind though that this engine will be a lot thirstier than the diesel, but because it's too early for the official test to have been conducted, we still don't know exactly how much thirstier. Now, it is perfectly true that most Q5s will spend their entire lives in town and on motorways and will never venture further off the road than your driveway. Even so, since we are in the middle of the prairie, we thought we'd venture off the public highway and see how the car deals with a trickier surface. The Q5 has always had four-wheel drive, but rather than the permanent system that Audi has been sticking with for the last few years, most versions, this one included, has a new on-demand system that disconnects drive to the rear axle under normal driving conditions to save fuel and reconnects it only when it's needed. Now obviously this is just a dirt track, so it's not exactly an exhaustive test of the Q5's off-roading credentials. But even so, the car is being very effective at detecting wheel slip and sorting everything out. In fairness, you've got to drive like a bit of an idiot to get this car anything approaching out of shape. And the on-demand bit? Well, I've driven plenty of surfaces like this in plenty of cars with permanent four-wheel drive, and if I'm honest, I can't really tell the difference. Of course, regardless of how the Q5 drives, the most important thing to a lot of buyers will be that it has the right image, and we'd say it's got that bit absolutely nailed. Yes, it's a lot smaller than the Q7, but it has that same visual chunkiness that makes it look aggressive and purposeful, and if anything, the Q5 has a slightly sharper edge. And of course, having four rings on your bonnet never does your image much harm either. Another important factor for buyers will be that this car has all the right equipment and tech, and it's another area in which the Q5 is bound to excel. Obviously, at this early stage, UK specifications are way off being finalised, but we would be absolutely staggered if all UK versions didn't come with kit including climate control, leather upholstery, all-round parking sensors and sat-nav. The options list will include lots more clever stuff besides, things like Audi's virtual cockpit information system, a Wi-Fi hotspot, head-up display, wireless phone charging and a sat-nav system that can predict where you want to go in advance. You'll also be able to add a suite of driver assistance systems that, in the right circumstances, will take care of most of the driving for you. However, there's one thing that Audi is famous for above all else that the Q5 simply must deliver on, and as we begin to consider that part, we finally arrive at our ultimate destination. This is the Hotel California in Todos Santos, and I'm told by someone who should know that this is the Hotel California that the Eagles sang about back in 1977. Now, I'm not sure how true that is, so I've got the lyrics here. Let's try our hand at a little bit of detective work. Well, it is definitely on a desert highway. It's not dark, but it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not gonna be. And yes, there is definitely a reasonably strong wind blowing through my rapidly thinning and greying hair. And what's the next bit? Warm smell of colitas rising up through the air. I don't even know why I'm bothering to smell. I don't even know what colitas are, let alone what one smells like. Even so, as evidence goes, it all feels a bit circumstantial. Whether or not this is the Hotel California, it's still a very cool place. Some might even say, such a lovely place. The question is, does the same apply to the Q5? Like we said earlier, there is one thing that Audi is famous for above all else, and that is producing high quality cabins that are a pleasure to sit in. Does the Q5 measure up? You bet it does. Every single one of the materials in here is plush and dense and sophisticated, and every one of these little finishing touches are as thoughtful as they are precise. It's a bit roomier than it was before as well, thanks to a longer wheelbase that gives you more rear legroom, and a slightly bigger boot will also be music to the ears for all those family car buyers. Yes, there are a lot of very posh feeling cars in the prestige SUV class, but we are confident that this thing will be a match for any of them. We've only had a very brief taste of the new Q5 and one that's not entirely finished yet, but even so we can tell that this car is going to be a massive step forward on the current one in terms of quality, practicality and dynamic ability. If you're about to sign on the dotted line for a Mercedes GLC, a BMW X3 or a Jaguar F-Pace and you can afford to wait, then we suggest that you might want to hang around and have a gander at this thing first. Hiya, I think we're just about done with our filming now, so are we all right to get going?
You can check out anytime you like.
Thank you very much.
But you can earn it.